Yo, this is Barack Lesnar of Barack Lesnar Hoops, bringing you a new video to prepare you for the 25-26 season. We're a little less than a month away. A lot of you are going to start drafting soon. So I wanted to put together this video diving deeper into my strategy, some players that we can focus on. We just want to frame our mind correctly so that when we go into the draft, we remove all the noise and we are moving with purpose. That is how you win. I tell people all of the time, fantasy basketball is not so much about knowing what to do, it's about knowing what not to do. And if you avoid the wrong players, if you avoid reaching for players way higher than you need to reach for them, if you're able to get value at every draft position, if you're able to guy or grab at 1/3, a guy or grab at guy or grab, what the hell is a guy or grab? If you're able to grab a guy at 130 that produces at a top 90 level, that is huge. Sometimes you can really mess up your first few picks and you can make up for it with how you use your last few picks. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. And also, we're going to focus as far as the playoff schedule. I want to really hone in your mind the importance of the fantasy basketball playoff schedule. That's actually something I kind of neglected right up until a couple of years ago. I would ignore it. I would draft the players that I wanted. And in my mind, hey, I could just trade for guys that are better. But when you are purposeful and you draft your strongest players with strong playoff schedules and you're thinking ahead, will they be resting? Will they be competing for the playoffs? Are they going to have the playing time and production that I need? Are they going to have enough games? Do I have too many guys with not enough games? If you start thinking of those things before you draft, the team that you're able to put together is possibly going to be historic as far as your own production. Before we get started, do me a favor and smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you have not yet. Click that little bell notification so you can be alerted when these videos drop. I have invested in StreamYard, which should allow me to really make high quality content more consistently throughout the season. All right, so here's something that I put together for us to discuss today. So I put together this resource for dominating your fantasy basketball league with Barack Lesnar. So the core philosophy of my channel and my, how would I put it, my framework is that I like precision over volume. What that means is I'm not just going to target the players with the most usage. A lot of people tell you avoid turnovers completely. I mean, just ignore turnovers, load up on usage players. It doesn't matter what their field goal percentage is. Doesn't matter what their free throw percentage is. Doesn't matter what their turnovers is. And I think this is a carryover from the regular NBA where people mostly focused on scorers, rebounders, guys that can get a lot of assists, the peripheral stats, your ability to protect the ball. It's not as heralded as being able to drop 40 points per game. But if you look at the NBA and the teams that have success, it's actually the teams that have players that fit my build that have success. And I think that same reason is why your teams have success. I don't think I invented this. I think I'm just discovering what it is that makes teams successful. So I always suggest for category leagues, and this is going to be the focus of my content, is category leagues to punt. What punting means is you're not trying to win every single category, because when you're trying to win every single category, what happens is you end up putting mediocre teams that lose 4, 5 every week, if not even worse, because you did not specialize your team. You did not focus your strengths. And by not focusing your strengths, you've essentially spread your weakness out across the entire team. Versus if you concentrate your strengths, build teams that are cohesive, and build teams where the strengths are aligned as well as the weaknesses are aligned, you can build these teams that dominate every single week, 7-2, and people just can't figure out how to beat you. Even when they do beat you, they might beat you 5-4 instead of 8-1. And having that consistency throughout the season is what gets you to the fantasy basketball playoffs. And the fantasy basketball playoffs is then a whole different beast. And we can focus more on that later. But right now, the trade-offs are always going to be inevitable. So if you have higher volume scoring, you have guys with heavy usage, that's going to come with some trade-offs. That means high turnovers, poor field goal percentage. Mediocrity is fatal. So by that, what I just told you, trying to be good at every category is a great way to be super mediocre and just lose consistently. You want a punt strategy that's decided by pick number 1 or 2. What that I mean is your first couple of picks should determine what your build is. If I pick Giannis first, then chances are I'm going to punt free throw percentage just because he's going to make it so hard to not do terrible in that category. So then it makes sense to draft other players who are terrible in that category, throw that whole category away, and then I load up on players that can get me a high field goal percentage, that can get me a lot of rebounds, that can get me a lot of points, and hopefully protect my turnovers, that can get me steals and blocks just by ignoring free throw percentage. I tend to not like punt free throw percentage because I find that efficient free throw shooters with low turnovers, I tend to find those more valuable. But again, if I do pick Giannis, I'm probably going to build around his weaknesses. And you should do that with any player that you're picking up. If you're picking up Trae Young, he gets a lot of turnovers. He can really hurt your field goal percentage. So you might want to decide in that situation, hey, turnovers is something that I'm willing to sacrifice. Or you might say, no, I'm not willing to sacrifice turnovers, so I'm just not picking Trae Young. Having the right mindset going into the draft, knowing who you're going to pick up, and then building around those players is how you build very strong teams. And it's what you've been doing for years listening to me. It's why you have the success that you have. And if you think what I am saying is correct, do me a favor and leave it in the comments. Let me know if these have worked for you. So some of the punts that I do, sometimes I like to do punt assists. And by that, I mean that I don't focus so much on assists. I actually focus on players with good assist to turnover ratio. What that means is I might ignore a guy that can get me 8 assists per game, but is getting me almost 5 turnovers per game. I might ignore him for a guy that gets me maybe 6 assists per game, but only gets me 2 turnovers per game. That's a better assist to turnover ratio. But what ends up happening is on those weeks when you're playing way more games than your opponent, just based on the volume of games, you can beat them in assists. But because you made sure to have players that are not turnover prone, and maybe you're facing someone that said, I don't care about turnovers, now you might actually beat them at turnovers as well, even though you have way more games. Then when you add players that can get you threes, you add players that can get you steals, you get players that can get you blocks, you add players that are either really efficient from the field or really efficient from the free throw line. That's when you start to put together teams that are really hard to beat. So some key targets, if you're punting assists, guys that are really popular are OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Miles Turner, Derek White. Not going to get you 8-9 assists per game. He has the potential to, but typically he's not going to, but he's going to keep the turnovers low. He's going to be really efficient. He's going to get you steals. He's going to get you blocks. These are all the sort of players that I love to build around. And you can see those key targets right there. So like I mentioned before with Giannis, with punt free throw builds, you kind of want to focus in the punt free throw build. Maybe you kind of ignore threes to some degree, because normally poor free throw percentage also comes along with lower threes, and it comes along with lower assists typically. But some key targets for a punt free throw build are Giannis Antetokounmpo, Rudy Gobert, Nicholas Claxton, Jared Allen, Zach Edey. Zach Edey is injured for the first few weeks of the season, but he fits that build. You have somebody like Donovan Clingan. There's a lot of other players that fit this traditional big man build, where they're not going to get you a bunch of threes. They're going to get you rebounds. They're going to get you a lot of blocks, and they're going to really help your field goal percentage. So you might lose free throw percentage every week, but you want to win field goal percentage every week in that situation. I don't think you ever want to be bad at both categories. The alternative is, if you're going to be really bad at field goal percentage every week, then you want to be really strong at free throw percentage every week. Do not be bad at do not be bad at field goal, free throw percentage, and turnovers. I assure you that if you build a team that is bad at those 3 categories, you're going to have a really hard time winning. And maybe in the past you had stacked teams with a bunch of talent, and you're like, why can't I win? Why am I losing 5-4 every single week? Chances are you were winning points, rebounds, assists. Maybe you got away with threes too, but then you were losing every other category because you focused too much on volume production over precision. So there's also guard heavy builds, and that's where you hoard point guards and secondary creators, and you punt traditional big man stats, maybe rebounding, blocking, and you focus instead on very efficient players that can get you a lot of assists, keep the turnovers low, hopefully get you some steals. You're probably not going to be as strong at rebounding, but you're able to win those traditional guard heavy skill sets. So I personally like an approach where I target big men that are unicorn. In general, I like to target players that are unicorns. And by unicorns, I mean, like before we said, traditionally speaking, a guy that gets you a lot of blocks tends to be a big guy. And because he's a big guy, traditionally speaking, they play closer to the basket, which means their field goal percentage is high. But because they play closer to the basket, they don't get as many threes. And maybe their free throw percentage is poor because they're not great shooters. But there are unicorns, players that can get you 3 blocks per game, but they also get you 2 threes per game. They'll have a great free throw percentage. I consider that a unicorn because now they're kind of blending out the inefficiencies of certain builds. You can build around these unicorns in ways you just can't with other types of players. And those players are the ones that are really hard to beat, especially if you're able to stack several of them together. So some of the unicorns I like to target, Nikola Jokic, of course, he is the ultimate unicorn. He is a center that's essentially getting you the production of a point guard from the assist category, really high free throw percentage, but he's also going to get you double-digit rebounds. He's going to get you 25 plus points per game, and he's going to do it on incredible efficiency. He's going to protect the ball. That guy is number one for a reason, and his team has the success he has for a reason. He is the ultimate example of this build, and that's why he's the consensus number one pick, I'd say, among any fantasy expert. Turnover mastery. So the silent killer. Turnovers are a negative category that bleed value. So target assist to turnover ratio unicorns like Chris Paul, Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Halliburton's injured this season, but in the past, he has been one of those players that you can count on to get you a ton of assists, keep the turnovers low. And not surprisingly, look how well his team did. Look how well the Oklahoma City Thunder did, a team full of players that fit the build that I'm telling you. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a guy that can score 30 points per game, do it on above 50% from the field, do it with amazing free throw percentage. He's getting you a bunch of steals, blocks, and he's not turning the ball over a lot. It's not a coincidence. These are the top players, the players that most fit the build that I am sharing with you right now. Scarcity manipulation, what that means is I like to draft, at the very least, I need 4 center eligible players, and I need at least 4 point guard eligible players. Sometimes I like to have 5, because when you have 5 of each, you're going to be a little thinner maybe at shooting guard, small forward, unless you really target players with positional versatility. Those guys that have 3 or more positions, those guys are amazing to have on your team. But what happens is inevitably some guy ends up with like 7 forwards, not enough point guards, not enough centers, and then they end up in the situation where they can't even play all their players because they don't fit the positions they have available. And in those scenarios, you have a ton of leverage to send a trade offer, and you might get an amazing forward because this person is desperate to shore up their point guard their point guard or big man positions. Roster flexibility, like I mentioned, target players with multi-position eligibility. So point guard, shooting guard eligibility, small forward, power forward eligibility. That's how you avoid gridlock. And that's how you build a team that even though you may have some injuries, you're able to stream and pivot quickly and decide which route it is that you want to take your team. I like to target players that are 30 or younger. Players that are 30 or younger are still on their upward trajectory. Once you start targeting players on the downside of their career, it's a lot more volatile. The fall off is so sudden. So someone like James Harden, I love James Harden. You probably need to pick him in the top 15. Historically speaking, you'd be validated in doing that. But historically speaking as well, point guards in their mid-30s drop off really quickly. They become more injury prone. They lose a step. You have a bunch of 18-year-olds joining the league. They're tiring you out. So it's a scenario where drafting a bunch of older players is just too risky, even though they might have the historical production. They might fit the build perfectly. If you load up on too many of those, the risk is too much. So I target maybe 1 or 2 at most. It's why I avoid drafting LeBron James. I feel like the drop off will be sudden. And the thing with LeBron, he has been injured more consistently over the last few years, and he's missing more and more time. And while his volume production is nice. You know, a lot of those other stats have kind of dropped off over the years that I value. Free throw percentage, steals, blocks, turnovers. Those are things that I value, and LeBron is not an amazing target. I'm not telling you not to draft him, but if you do, make sure that you're drafting a lot of other young players around him and don't load up on old, aging veterans, because that can be really hard to overcome if they all drop off at the exact same time. So some rookie targets, I think this is obvious. Until I see preseason, I'm not going to put too much credibility into too many of the rookies when I'm talking to you about drafting. I like to see preseason because it lets us know what the rotations are going to be, who's going to get minutes, who's performing in which categories. You might see a guy getting a bunch of steals or blocks in preseason, and then you can be like, oh, if this guy gets minutes during the regular season, he might be a potential target to get me some steals and blocks. And that happens almost every year. I've seen it with Bilal Coulibaly as a rookie preseason. I've seen it with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a rookie. I've seen it with a lot of different players like Devin Vassell. He was getting a bunch of steals and threes his rookie season and preseason, and that put him on my radar. And to this day, he's a guy that's a consistent guy in getting you steals, scoring, being a pretty efficient scorer, things that I value. So preseason is going to be key in determining what other rookies to target. But right now, I'd say the biggest targets are Cooper Flagg, of course, #1 overall pick. If you want him, you're probably going to have to burn a top 40 pick. He has a ton of upside. He's going to have a bunch of usage. They essentially got rid of Luka to bring this guy on. Maybe that's my conspiracy theory, but it's one that I believe. And then you have Dylan Harper. Chris Paul's no longer with the Spurs. He's playing with somebody with the ultimate unicorn, somebody like Victor Wembanyama. That could be great for his game. And the team might not be super competitive just yet, which means a lot of opportunity to develop him, including towards the fantasy basketball playoffs. So Dylan Harper, definitely somebody that I would target, and you can get him around a little after the 100 range based on where I'm seeing at draft positions. So some of my shot blocking unicorns, guys that get you blocks, threes, and free throw percentage that I value. So you got Miles Turner. He's with my Milwaukee Bucks now. Again, a guy that decent free throw percentage. I think he's going to have more offensive responsibility on the Milwaukee Bucks. I think he's a great pairing with Giannis Antetokounmpo. And we saw what Giannis was able to do for Brook Lopez. Miles Turner is a very similar player to Brook Lopez as far as his fantasy basketball production. So I really like his odds to produce at a high level. Not a lot of turnovers, not going to hurt your free throw percentage, and he's going to get you a lot of blocks, a lot of threes. He's going to score in the teams for you. He might not be a double-digit rebounder. He might not get you a lot of assists, but I think he's a glue guy that you can build around. Similar to him, Jaren Jackson Jr., not as efficient. I think more potential as an offensive force than Miles Turner, can get you more steals than Miles Turner. These are guys that stacking them together, they are a little injury prone, so there's some risk there. But if you're able to get these guys at the same time, all playing at the same time, you get these guys together with a Victor Wembanyama, with a Chet Holmgren, your team becomes impossible to beat. Brook Lopez, I think, great situation for him with the Clippers. I think he can get his find his way into getting some minutes. He's a strong defensive player, even at his advanced age. He can still get you threes. He can still get you blocks. And I think that's a great situation with him playing with James Harden, playing with Chris Paul. I think Brook Lopez is going pretty late right now. There's a lot of question marks around his role, how many minutes he's going to get. And I think you can take advantage of that. Draft him late in your drafts. And the Clippers have a pretty strong fantasy basketball playoff schedule, which is something that you want to keep in mind. Kristaps Porzingis is now with the Atlanta Hawks. He's pretty injury prone, but when he's healthy, he can get you threes, he can get you blocks, he can get you great free throw percentage from a big man. He can score, he can rebound, he can get you some assists. He's not super turnover prone. He's a very effective player when he is not injured. He's in a new situation right now. They got rid of Clint Capella. He shouldn't have a lot of competition for minutes, but again, he is injury prone. But I think he's still worth the gamble because when he's producing, that production is very hard to beat. His production's very similar to someone like a Karl Anthony Towns. Maybe like you'll get like 85, 80% of what you get from a Karl Anthony Towns, except for Karl Anthony Towns, you need to burn the top 10 to 12 pick. You might be able to get Kristaps Porzingis around pick 60. So 3 and D wings, guys that I really value. So Again, market inefficiency is the managers overvalue those popcorn stats and neglect efficiency and defensive metrics. I do not. I love players that can get me threes. I love players that can get me steals. I love players that can get me blocks. If they keep the turnovers low and they're efficient as well, that is a combination of factors that I can forgive. I don't care if you score 4 points per game if you can help me in those other areas. That kind of describes a Draymond Green. Again, a franchise player on a franchise team that won multiple championships. As much crap as Draymond Green gets, he was a huge part of the success for that team because he made all of the other pieces so much more effective. That is the power that unicorns have on your team. Mikal Bridges doesn't make a ton of mistakes, very durable, plays a ton of games. The Knicks, depending on your format, have a decent fantasy basketball playoff schedule. He's going to contribute a little bit across the board. He's an Iron Man, and he's a great glue player, and his sort of production fits almost any kind of build. Tobias Harris used to be that sort of player in the past. He's fallen off, so I think Mikal Bridges has taken that spot. Herbert Jones, he's injury prone as well, but when this guy is playing, elite steals guy, can get you some blocks, can get you threes. He's not super inefficient. He's really a great 9-category player when healthy. There has been a drop off over the last few years, but I think Herbert Jones is the closest thing we have right now to somebody that I adore from the past. Mr. Rocco, Robert Covington, special shout out to him. We miss our Lord Covington, and I hope he's doing well. But I think Herbert Jones has the potential to be anointed if he manages to stay healthy. Efficient guards with steals and blocks. Derek White, talked about him already. Great situation with him on the Celtics. If you can grab him and a lot of these other players that I mentioned, if you grab him along with some of these unicorn big men that we're talking about, I'm telling you, you're going to have a championship team. And if you do have a championship team, go look back at your team and tell me how many of these sort of players you had, and you'd be surprised to see, wow, he has a point. Peyton Pritchard, great situation for him. His at-draft position is still pretty low, given that last season he was producing at a top 50 level for a large part of the season. Microwave scorer, can get you a bunch of threes. He can get some assists, keeps the turnovers low, can get you a bunch of threes, and he can do it in limited playing time. And now his playing time is probably going to be less limited than it's been at any point in his career. He's still a young player, so we might see him take a big leap. I think he's one of the key sleepers right now that you should be targeting. Jalen Suggs, we saw him have a strong season last year, similar to Derek White in his ability to get you a lot of steals. I think he has that sort of defensive potential of a Derek White. So Jalen Suggs, you can grab around pick 100, and the Orlando Magic have a very strong fantasy basketball playoff schedule. So that is something that I would keep in mind when I am drafting around 100 and looking to shore up my point guard, shooting guard position. So I want to discuss some advanced winning tactics that we could start implementing right away. And if you're enjoying this content, I have a draft guide that I created that has a bunch of information that's going to be useful to you this season. Not only that, it really helps support the work that I am doing so that I can keep bringing you this content, keep making these videos, and put a little bit of money in my pocket for the effort, which is a lot of effort that I put in making this content for you. You can go to the link in the description. It's only $9.99, and I assure you it's going to be very helpful when you go into your draft to have this resource. So if your fantasy basketball playoff schedule are weeks 19 through 21, the best schedules as far as teams with 12 games, I think these are the players that you can target that are going to help your team. We have Karl Anthony Towns. His ADP is around 11, so you'll have to use one of your top picks on him. But with a very strong playoff schedule under this format, he could be very formidable. Devin Booker on the Suns. The Suns have a very strong playoff schedule. His ADP is around 13, so keep that in mind when you're drafting around the beginning of the second round. Kevin Durant, Houston has an amazing playoff schedule. Will they be competitive? Fred VanVleet got injured. We'll see. They don't really have a strong point guard, but Reed Shepherd would make a good pickup very late in drafts because, again, Houston has a very strong fantasy basketball playoff schedule. Jalen Brunson, just like Karl Anthony Towns, very productive. You're going to have to draft them in the top 25, but if you want a strong point guard that helps you across the board with a strong basketball playoff schedule, weeks 19 to 21, Jalen Brunson is probably going to be your guy. Kawhi Leonard, you could grab him at almost pick 50, and I think he's worth the gamble. The Clippers have a great playoff schedule. And again, very strong production in all of the areas which I value. John Collins, also on the Clippers, can be a very productive big man. He can hit some threes. He can get some blocks. He can score. Clippers have a great schedule. And I think we'll see him playing a lot next to Ivica Zubac, which could be great for his production. He's playing with James Harden, very athletic guy. I like his potential to produce. You can pick him at almost pick 90. This is a guy in the past that was drafted in the top 30, top 40 spots. So John Collins, I really like him right now as a target. Mark Williams on the Suns, very injury prone. His ADP might actually be a little higher than 108 right now, but when healthy, he gives you very strong big man production. He can get you blocks, and his free throw percentage is actually really strong, which makes him a unicorn. He's not a guy that's going to get you a lot of threes. He's a huge question mark as far as health, but if we can get him around pick 90 to 100, the upside might be worth the gamble, especially if you can get him healthy for the fantasy basketball playoffs. Jabari Smith Jr. has an opportunity to produce. He's been incredibly inconsistent the majority of his career, but he is a guy that can get you some threes. He is a guy that can get you some blocks, and he is one of the best shooters on that Rockets team that will need some spacing. One of my viewers left a comment pointing that out to me, and he's absolutely right. I'm a little worried about his inconsistency, but he is a young player. I believe this is his third or fourth season. I believe it might be his third, and the third year is where a lot of players take that big leap. So it might be the year to target Jabari Smith Jr., ADP around 118. Solid free throw percentage. He's not going to hurt your turnovers. And if he puts it all together, and we've seen stretches of him producing at a high level, he can give you some Chet Holmgren-like production when he's doing really well. Will he take that sort of leap? I guess we'll see. Chris Paul, Brook Lopez, two other players on the Clippers. Now, they are aging. So, again, if you already have a lot of aging players, you might want to be a little careful. But if you have mostly a young core and you want to take a risk later on in the draft for some upside, for some players with strong schedules that can help you in a lot of the categories that I like to preach, Chris Paul, ADP of 136, Brook Lopez, ADP of almost 139. These could be your last two picks, and now you just got a very strong point guard option and a very strong center option. Will Chris Paul find himself into a lot of playing time? We've seen him play with James Harden in the past, and it worked out great. So I think Chris Paul is going to be decent, especially considering how late he's going. Now, if you are in weeks 20 through 22, which is March 9th through the 29th, some of the best schedules with 12 games. You got James Harden, Alperen Şengün, Ivica Zubac, Kawhi Leonard. You have Jimmy Butler. And if you have Jimmy Butler, of course, you can also add Steph Curry to that list, even though he's not listed there. But Steph Curry is a target for you in under this format. John Collins, again, Cameron Johnson with the Denver Nuggets, Draymond Green, CJ McCollum. Washington has a great schedule, but if they're bad, maybe he's not playing for your fantasy basketball playoff schedule. He's a very productive combo guard that you can grab around pick 100. Very consistent when he's playing, but he can be injury prone and tends to miss a lot of time. So that's something to keep in mind. Alex Sarr has that shot blocking potential, had a great rookie season and could take a big leap. And again, Washington has a very strong playoff schedule. Bilal Coulibaly, I do believe he's dealing with an injury and might miss some time at the beginning of the season, but he's an explosive defensive wing. Reminds me a little bit of what you can get with like an OG Anunoby, but I think maybe he has more scoring potential and more potential as a playmaker. So the upside is there. And if you're able to grab him late with the schedule that the Wizards have, if he manages to be healthy, he's somebody that could really help you out. Cam Whitmore, he used to be with the Rockets. He is now with the Wizards. And I think we might see him surprise some people. Don't draft him, but definitely put him on some sort of watch list and see how he does on that Washington team, because I could see him being a popular streamer throughout the season, potentially a strong pickup throughout the season. And then some teams with strong schedules, and this, we already mentioned Steph Curry, but we have Trae Young, you have Franz Wagner, and you also have Jaren Jackson Jr., who again might be missing some time at the beginning of the season. And if you're looking for weeks 21 through 23, who has the strong schedules? So you have Alperen Şengün, Amen Thompson. Again, these Rockets players, when they have 12 games, Amen Thompson might actually play some point guard this season due to the injury to Fred VanVleet. And if he manages to get point guard eligibility, he might be worth a pick in the top 30 because that's what it's going to cost you to grab this guy. Jaren Jackson Jr. might miss the first few weeks of the season, but amazing potential, amazing upside. His team just paid him, so he is part of their future plans. His former teammate, Desmond Bane, I like his opportunity in Orlando. Orlando has a strong playoff schedule. This is a guy that's efficient from the field. He's efficient from the free throw line. He can score. He can help you a little bit across the board. Not going to get you a ton of steals and blocks, but he's not going to turn the ball over. Very productive player, and I like his opportunity there in Orlando. Jalen Suggs, we talked about him a little bit already. Zach Edey, he's dealing with some injury concerns. He did have surgery on his ankle, I believe, so he's going to be missing the beginning of the season. Jabari Smith Jr., we already discussed. But Santi Aldama, with all of the injuries to the big man rotation for Memphis, Santi Aldama has in that draft position of 121, but that might be a great sleeper for you, especially if those big men manage to not get healthy at any point this season. Maybe Santi Aldama plays himself into a starting role throughout the season. When given the minutes, Santi Aldama is incredibly productive. He can shoot, he can score, he can rebound, he does a little bit of everything, but his role tends to be based on injuries to the starters. So I think this might be a big season for Santi, and he might be one of the strongest big man sleepers because of the context that I just provided you. Ty Jerome, Memphis, had a great season last year for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I like his opportunity in Memphis. Like we mentioned before, they just lost Desmond Bane, and if he manages to step up into some of that production, and again, you have John Morant on that team who's pretty injury prone himself. So Ty Jerome, much like Santi Aldama, could end up playing a much larger role than is being accounted for right now with an ADP of only 126. Alex Sarr, we already talked about. CJ McCollum, Bilal, and Cam Whitmore, again, with Washington having that very strong schedule. They make for very, very strong targets. And I'm sorry, there's some errors here with this guide because Kevin Durant, Franz Wagner have 12-game schedule, so they should be at that top list with 12 games, not with 11 games. So disregard that. I'm going to make sure I fix that. Sorry. So players that you might want to avoid. Look, I know it's hard to tell you to avoid Nikola Jokic, but weeks 19 through 21, Nikola Jokic only plays 9 games. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, same thing. Jalen Williams, same thing. Chet Holmgren, same thing. So if you load it up on several of these guys, that could be very difficult to overcome. And then you got a guy like these Oklahoma City Thunder players, when it's time for the fantasy basketball playoff schedules, they might only play 3 games that week for you, but they might sit one of those games because they're resting their starters for the for the basketball playoffs, the real playoffs, not the fantasy ones. And that would be to your detriment. So that is something that you want to keep in mind. So the LA Clippers, 12 games. Houston has 12 games. OKC has 9 games. New York Knicks have 12 games, weeks 19 to 21, but only 9 in weeks 21 to 23. So make sure when you're drafting, if you want to draft Karl Anthony Towns, if you want to draft Jalen Brunson, if you want to draft Josh Hart, make sure you know what fantasy basketball playoff schedule your league has, because it could either make you or it could break you. So my trading strategy is very, very simple. I use investing principles. So buy low targets. You want to target players with elite 9 category shapes. So steals, turnovers, percentages, undervalued because they don't have flashy popcorn stats. We already talked a little bit about that. But again, Miguel Bridges, OG Anunoby. It's not a mystery to me why the Knicks had the success they had last season, because I've mentioned Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby. That's like 5 different guys that fit the strategy that I am telling you, and the Knicks had their best season in a very long time last year. Again, not a coincidence. So some sell high triggers, even though I'm telling you to draft Kawhi and Kristaps Porzingis, there is some risk involved with their health. So if you draft them and they manage to produce at a high level, you might want to consider trading them when their value is hot, because once the shoe drops and they're out for the season because of a predictable injury, you might really regret not trading them when you had the chance. So keep an eye out for long periods of production that might be a good opportunity to sell high and bring somebody to your team that's a little bit less of an injury risk. And just to close this out, when integrating these rookies, I want you to remember rookies tend to start slow, but a lot of the time you see them really pick up after the All-Star break. Somebody that comes to mind is Trae Young. I remember his rookie year. He did terrible for the first few months. People were making fun of him. They were saying Luka's so much better. But then after the All-Star game, Trae Young's production after the All-Star game actually eclipsed Luka Doncic's production after the All-Star break. Even though Luka had the stronger start, after the All-Star break, Trae Young really put it together. And if you had him on your team, he really ended up helping you out. All right, guys, that has been my video. I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it productive. If you did, do me a favor, smash that like button for me, share it, leave a comment, click that bell notification again to be alerted when these videos drop. If you see my shorts, like them, watch them. All of these things really help me out. If you want an amazing tool for this fantasy basketball season, there is a link in the description to the Sports Wizard website. I actually had a conversation with Bilal, who is one of the creators of the Sports Wizard, and he talks about the auto pickup function where you can now have players picked up for you at 3 o'clock in the morning when waivers change over to the new day. So no longer having to set an alarm and still being able to get that guy that you want. I think you want to look into that service, and that's just one of the tools that you have access to. If you use my code BLH, you actually get a discount on that service, and you get to support small fantasy basketball content creators like myself and Bilal. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate every single one of you. Until our next video, take care.